Welcome back to Across the Gridiron. It's Eddie here, and I've got my partner in crime, Matt. He's here with me as well, all the way from Sheffield. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm great, Eddie, mate. Thanks for having me back. Obviously, the first time couldn't have been too bad if you invited me back. So, no, yeah, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. I think we had a blast, and I think we're gonna have a blast. This week as well. We're gonna talk about NFL MVP, talks, awards and things like that. We're gonna talk about deep dive into the predictions as well, and look at some of the things that happened last week. So you want to stick around, for all of that. And before we dive in, guys, please hit that like and subscribe, button. And put something in the comments as well. Let's know, how you're tuning to us, where you're tuning in from. I think we'll always love to know that as we're building this community. Um, Matt, I don't know where we can start from, but we've got to start somewhere, right? And before we dive in, let me just ask you, like, what's the worst performance that you've ever seen for anything? It might be sports, it might be, something else. What's like the worst performance you've ever seen?
Well, when you put it in the script that you want to talk about real sort of poor performance, I'm like, oh Christ, have you been speaking to my wife again? Um, but if we stick strictly to sport now, you know, people who know us will know that obviously we worked together for a number of years, and as part of when we were working together, we had a five-a-side football team when
You did.
you
Oh
and I
gosh.
played together, and obviously I played with you long enough to know that there were lots of bad performances there. That you were charging through players as if you were a defensive end, like OC Omenora in his prime, wiping out the other players. So that's probably going to be up there. But again,
Yeah.
as you mentioned in last week's podcast, I am not only a Miami Dolphins fan, I'm also a Sheffield Wednesday fan, and I have
Yeah.
seen us lose 8-0, 6-0, 6-1, 7-2. I've seen them all, so I couldn't necessarily think of just one.
Oh.
So yeah, lots, and I'm sure as a Cowboys fan, I'm sure you've got quite a few that you can think of right now as well.
I have quite a few, and talking about our football for games, God, we used to be sorry, right? I remember we would go for a game, and you'd be so frustrated about how many goals we were letting in because we're just not stopping, and we weren't scoring as much as well. But listen, the Cowboys, they have to be one of the worst teams right now. I can't even believe I'm saying this about the Cowboys. This is the Americans football team. This is the America's team, right? And last week they really, really sucked, right? I mean, how did you look at that game? Because for me, I just have to look at a team that seem like they've lost their way completely, right? And you can almost look at every part of the Cowboys, whether it's the coaching, whether it's the players, whether it's the GM, Jerry Jones, everybody had a bad day, right? Um, I couldn't believe when I was looking at the stats that Cooper Rush threw for less than 2 yards attempt. Now, now, to actually do that in an NFL game, that's basically you've thrown it to the line of scrimmage, right? You've basically thrown it to the line of scrimmage. This is not per carry. This is per attempt. It was awful.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been poor. I mean, let's tell it like it is. I mean, obviously the game Sunday was awful, right? And but it's you can't just look at this single game. It's the whole season in
Yeah,
isolation, right?
yeah.
I'm gonna throw some stats obviously at you, which as a Cowboys fan, I'm sure that you'll appreciate. This is four consecutive losses for the first time since 2020. The last time you had five losses in a row was 2015. That season you had seven in a row, and your next two games against Houston and Washington. So that could easily go to seven in a row. If you look at this season as a whole, 31st on rushing defense, you're the second worst red zone offense, you're the second run worst run defense. You've lost your 0-4 at home, and that was after a 16-0 home winning
Record.
streak. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's all gone. It's all gone to pot, right? So, but you mentioned Cooper Rush. I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for any kind of second or third choice quarterback who gets sort of pulled into the position, especially when you're replacing someone like a Prescott. It was the same. We've seen it with Miami. We've seen it this season. You take Tua out of that lineup, the backup quarterbacks just can't cut it. They're not to the same standard. But again, if you can't have if your $60 million quarterback can't get it going in that team, what chances of Cooper Rush have? What
Mm,
chances of Trey Lance have?
yeah.
So I
Oof.
mean, Trey Lance's career is pretty much over now. If he can't get into that team, if they're not going to give him any time, so they may as well just cut their losses completely. But it's yeah, it's just
Who's to
poor.
blame? Who's to blame, right? I mean, because when we talk about for sport as fans, right? We want to try and figure out what is going wrong, right? Are we blaming Jerry Jones? Are we blaming McCarthy? Did Jerry Jones set up McCarthy to fail? He didn't give him a contract. He's not looking to give him a contract. He's like a dead man walking, right? We all know this. Like it's like, when people get like, you put in your notice and they say you've got to serve 3 months. Like everyone knows what happens in that 3 months. No new projects want to talk to you because they think you're going to be out the door, right? And nobody wants to take anything you're doing seriously because they know that, well, you can't be held accountable. So who do we look at for this?
It's a good question. I mean, the book always stops, I think, with the owner, right? In terms of how you set up your organization and how you set up the franchise.
Yeah,
Um, I think you've paid Prescott, but obviously by doing that, you haven't given him enough weapons or enough protection around, right?
yeah,
So again, you say going back to Prescott again. I've got some here. So again, last season he had 8 interceptions all season.
yeah,
This season is at eight interceptions in 8 games, right? So that for me looks at okay, well maybe the foundation of the team just isn't there, the protection isn't there, and that comes down to coaching. You then fall on luck, right? Because again, we've talked about a number of injuries that you guys have had,
yeah.
um, and at the back again, I'm just trying to find the guys'
Yeah.
names, but oh yeah, Kalen Carson, he was at the back, he was a weak link.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
play, but he's playing before he's ready.
yeah.
He's been drafted in because of Bland's injury. And
Yeah.
when you're a quarterback, if you're a good quality quarterback, you're looking down the field and you can see you've got Trayvon Diggs, you've got Jordan Lewis. You're going to target the rookie, right? It's you just
Abso-
you're going to target the rookie. So there's an element of bad luck there as well.
Yeah.
But overall, I think the organization's just been mismanaged when he's coming out and giving interviews outside an elevator or whatever he is, blaming, people are blaming the sunlight and people are
Yeah.
blaming it's not a good look, I think, for
Yeah.
anything within the organization. And then you've got the players, and again, the name guy escapes me in the locker room saying about McCarthy. Oh well, if he
Yeah.
goes, it doesn't really matter.
Michael
Um,
Parsons.
yeah, that's the one. So, so yeah, like I just think an organization, they just seem to be, it just seems to be sort of rotten at the core at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, what are you going to do? Jerry Jones isn't going to sell up, is he? Right?
No.
He's already said
It's
he's not going to sack McCarthy. You've
no.
got you've got Prescott's out for the season,
Yep.
so they're gonna have either Rush or Lance are going to have to step up. And I think this is where the coaching's got it's got to come down to the coaching right now.
Yeah. Like you said, the Cowboys play the Texans, they play the Commanders, who we're going to talk about later. Who these are two decent, football teams, but also good coached football teams as well. I think the Cowboys will be looking for a very early draft next season, maybe top five, at this rate, because I just can't see a win. coming from anywhere. But anyway, let's move on to our next topic, right? Because there is a link to this particular topic, and obviously CD Lamb held out, yeah, in the off season. Jamar Chase also held out. But he was absolutely incredible. Like for those of you that play fantasy, you would have known Jamar Chase in my fantasy league, and I also had him. So when I was looking at my fantasy results, I was already smiling because Jamar Chase had 54 points. So I knew that no matter what, this guy was not going to catch me. And he had Lamar Jackson and his quarterback, and I had Stafford. So, and I was beginning to worry because I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get done this week. But Jamar Chase was absolutely incredible in that game. Now, everyone talks about players holding out. How do you see that? I mean, clearly in Cowboys, it was a big thing, but it doesn't seem like it's the same in Cincinnati. I mean, at least long-term effect, of holding out. What's your take with Jamar Chase and the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean that's well. First of all, let's talk about the Bengals and let's talk about that last game for a second before coming to contract. Before we talk about Chase's contract, because it was absolutely insane, right?
Yeah,
How these guys lost that game is beyond me. With Chase and Burrows, you've got probably the best duo in the
yeah,
NFL at the
yeah,
moment, right? You talk about Chase 11 receptions, 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. Burrows threw for 428 yards, 4 TDs, no interceptions. You know, over the last 10 years, a team who has had over 400 yards, 4 TDs, and zero interceptions, they are 33 and 5, right?
yeah.
Teams don't lose. They don't lose a
You
game.
just don't.
You
Yeah, you just
don't.
don't.
You don't know. And the problem with the Bengals, they've got this, and we'll talk about this later in sort of part two when we talk about MVP conversation, and we'll sure we'll
Yeah.
talk about Burrows within that. But how you can have these two just playing so well and not winning? I mean, they're losing games by the barest of margins. They're 0-5 when the score has been between 6 points and fewer. So yeah, just incredible, and it's great for fantasy football fans like yourself. But if you're a Bengals fan, you must be absolutely tearing your hair out.
Yeah, absolutely got it. And you know what? Last time I was talking about Joe Burrow and I was saying, how long are we still gonna hold him right up there,
Mm-hmm.
just behind, Patrick Mahomes. And it almost like he heard me, So thank you, Joe Burrow, for giving you know, the inspiration for that game because he absolutely went and ripped it all over the shop.
Mm-hmm.
264 yards for Jamar Chase. Normally, you go over 100 yards. You've had a great game. To go over 200 yards, that is absolutely ridiculous. And fair play to him. I think the Bengals might just be picking up a bit of steam, and they have form for this, right? They always start traditionally very slow, and then they start to pick up, things. And when you go against decent teams and you lose like that, it gives a bit of confidence. Obviously, you never like to lose, but when you perform like that, it just puts you in a different headspace,
Mm-hmm.
going into that next game. So I fully expect them to really show out, in the
Absolutely.
next game, as well. And it's a shame though that he's left it too late, right? Because um I feel like if he had done this a little bit earlier, maybe we'll be talking about him in our next segment, right? When we'll be talking, about awards, as well. So I don't think the holdout has affected him negatively. I think Jamar Chase, is showing that he's an elite wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And with Joe Burrow, I think they're just going to continue to do damage, in the league. So I think that's my take on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, let's talk about the contract, which was your original question before I led you on a bit of a that little bit of a path there. So yeah, so just a bit of background for those who may not know, who might be new to sort of the NFL. So obviously, Jamar Chase is coming to the end of his rookie deal,
Yeah,
and over the summer he was offered a long-term 4-year deal just for a small amount of 140 million with 90 million guaranteed. Now, those contracts have stalled. I think as far as I've heard and as far as I've read, the Chasers camp was actually happy with the numbers. It was the guarantees and when the guarantees were kicking, which has kind of led the conversation to being broke down. And I
Yeah.
think he missed the majority of practice, I think,
Yeah,
of
he
season.
wasn't there camp. He
Wasn't there
wasn't
at
there at
all,
all in
no.
camp. Yeah.
But he played in game one, and he's getting
Yeah.
up to speed. And as we've been talking about, you know he's on he's on fire. So certainly in the last week, and he's proving that he is worth that money. He proves that he deserves to be in that top pay bracket. He was certainly putting up the numbers and showing he was worth every cent. So where does that leave it? Where does that leave him? Obviously, he can still negotiate a contract, but
Yeah.
Bengals tend not to do that during the season.
Yeah.
So we could be in a situation when it comes to the end of the season, especially if Bengals don't make the playoffs, which if they continue this playing amazingly but losing, they won't make the playoffs. But they could be in a situation where they could lose him. He could sign for another team. Now, in terms of how that leaves the Bengals, is they need to get him signed up. They're not going to be able to replace him. You're not going to
Yeah.
find a better duo out there. We talked a little bit about this last week when we mentioned the Giants who decided to pay their quarterback but get rid of Barkley. I know it's a slightly
Mhm.
different combination, but again,
Yeah.
still, if you've got a QB like Burrows, you need to give him weapons.
Yeah.
Um, sometimes, I mean, you see it in obviously our side of the pond in our football. Lots of times, the way the market seems to work now is if you're a world class player, you let your contract run down.
Yeah.
You let your contract run down, and you basically create like a massive sort of you just create huge demand for yourself, and clubs are willing to throw money at you. Now, obviously, I know the spending cap in our football is different to American football,
Yeah.
but you do wonder inside the locker room if that's got to put a bit of a not a bit of a downer, but it's going to create a lot of uncertainty within that
Mhm.
locker room.
Yeah.
Right. So it clearly isn't affecting them now, but as the season goes on, if they are still tight, if they're still not quite getting over the line, if their playoff hopes are still sort of hanging by a thread going into the last few weeks of the season,
Yeah.
football's all about marginal gains. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, if you're the Bengals or if you're the organization, think, okay, well, we've got these amazing duo, but we're still not winning.
Yeah.
Why are we not winning? Is it because our defense is poor? Is it because we don't have the right offensive line? Well, okay, well, maybe the money we were going to give Chase, we maybe need to invest in other areas. So it's a real tough one for the organization to pick through.
Yeah, and just finally on that, I mean, you're right, cap, space is a real thing in the NFL. But the only thing I would say is that there are teams that are finding a way around it. Just go look at the Chiefs, I know they let Tyreek Hill go, because they didn't want to pay him, but the Eagles, managed to bring everybody back, as well. But, teams might be looking at Travis Hunter, the player from Colorado, Deion Sanders' team, he's supposedly, be a new prospect, coming in. So maybe that's what people are looking at, but we'll see. We'll see. So that's it for part one. And in the next section, we're going to be talking about MVP awards and all the awards that go on at this time of the season.